Dramatical. December 4, 1872. The Mary Celeste, also known as the ghost ship, was discovered with not a soul on board while still under sail. She was spotted off the coast of Portugal, heading towards the Strait of Gibraltar. No one had the slightest idea what had happened to the crew. The weather was nearly perfect, and it was known she had sailed from New York with an experienced captain and capable crew. Short backstory. The Mary Celeste, built in Canada in 1861 at the Spencer's Island shipyards, was initially named Amazon. She was launched the same year the U.S. Civil War broke out. The brigantine Mary Celeste was known to be about 31 meters long, 7.7 meters wide, and had a displacement of 202 tons. However, from the moment of her first launch, she seemed cursed for some strange reason. During her first decade of voyages, she was involved in several mishaps and changed owners numerous times. Look at the following chronological events. Her first captain, Robert McClellan, fell ill and died in 1861 immediately after her maiden voyage. During her first Atlantic crossing that same year, she collided with a sunken two-masted ship in the Strait of Dover. The Mary Celeste needed repairs again. On her 1863 voyage under Captain John Parker, the ship suffered major hull damage after hitting a reef. The Mary Celeste required major repairs at the shipyards. Later, a fire broke out at the shipyards, interrupting Parker's command. Upon returning to America in 1867, she ran aground at Cow Bay, Nova Scotia. After being pulled off the rocks, she continued to change hands. No one made any profit from her. In fact, some of them went bankrupt. Eventually, she was purchased by an American, James Winchester. James bought her at auction in New York for $1850. She underwent a major overhaul and reconstruction, costing another $8,960. When she returned, the ship looked completely different and barely resembled the Amazon. Thus, her name was changed to Mary Celeste. The ill-fated incident. In October 1872, the Mary Celeste, docked in the East River in New York, was ready for a journey to Genoa, Italy. Benjamin Briggs, aged 37, was appointed captain of the ship. Also on board were Briggs' 30-year-old wife Sarah and their 2-year-old child. On board were 7 crew members. That made a total of 10 people. Captain Briggs was a highly experienced and capable seaman who had commanded 5 ships during his career. He owned several ships himself and had spent most of his life at sea. The Mary Celeste left New York on November 7, 1872. She was carrying 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol worth about $35,000 and was fully insured. Strangely, after nearly a month at sea, on December 4, 1872, a British-registered ship called the Di Gradia discovered the Mary Celeste between the Azores and Portugal. She appeared deserted, yet was still under sail. There was not a soul on board. So what could have caused such a mysterious disappearance of all those people? The weather had been good, and there was ample food and water on the ship, enough for 6 months of sailing. All the crew members were very experienced sailors and trustworthy. Even personal belongings, including valuables, were left untouched. Possible explanations. Here are some conjectures and theories underlying the Mary Celeste mystery. Piracy. Some suggested the Mary Celeste fell victim to North African pirates known to operate in the area. Pirates would have killed everyone on board and thrown the bodies overboard. However, no similar acts of piracy had been reported in the Strait of Gibraltar that year or in the previous decade. This was likely due to the presence of the British fleet there. Even if piracy had occurred, it seems almost impossible to believe pirates would have spared all the crew's personal and valuable property. It appears no one even touched the cargo. Furthermore, there were no signs of violence on the ship. Foul play by the Di Gradia crew. Another theory was that the crew of the brigantine Di Gradia, who rescued the abandoned Mary Celeste, had killed everyone aboard and then fabricated the ghost ship story to claim salvage rights. But this seems highly unlikely. There were no signs of a struggle on the ship. The Dei Gratia had departed a week after the Mary Celeste and couldn't have caught up to her. Captain Morehouse of the Dei Gratia was a good friend of Briggs. Insurance fraud. Some thought the entire incident was probably staged to collect the insurance money, but that would have required Morehouse of the Dei Gratia to be in collusion with Briggs. While possible, this would only make sense if one of them owned the Mary Celeste. The owner was James Winchester. Furthermore, the insured value was fairly modest, so such a carefully planned and staged operation for such a modest sum seems utterly implausible. Dramatical. It is well documented that when the crew of the Dei Gratia boarded the Mary Celeste, they found a lot of water on deck and about 3 feet, 1 meter, of water in the hold. They also discovered that 2 of the 3 bilge pumps had been disassembled, leaving only one operational. This led to the theory that the Mary Celeste might have been struck by a violent storm, and as the ship took on water, Captain Briggs ordered the crew to abandon ship. However, there are inconsistencies in this theory. No storms were reported in that part of the Atlantic at the time the Mary Celeste was found adrift. The water level was not high enough to justify an evacuation. The ship was still in good condition. Still, one might argue that since Briggs had his family on board, he might have acted more cautiously. But if that were the case, why didn't they return to the ship later and explain what happened? The drunken crew theory. Investigators noted that 9 out of the 1,701 alcohol barrels were empty, leading to speculation that the crew drank the alcohol, became intoxicated, and murdered Briggs and his family, either due to his strict discipline or a drunken brawl. While this sounds plausible, it seems unlikely. Briggs was known as an intelligent, well-mannered captain. He was a teetotaler, never drank alcohol, and likely forbade his crew from drinking on board. The seaquake theory. Captain David Williams suggested that an underwater earthquake might have caused 9 barrels to shift and leak, explaining the empty casks. The violent rumbling could have panicked the crew, making them flee in the lifeboat. Later, they may have tried to row back to the ship but failed, ultimately perishing at sea. Problems with this theory. The Dei Gratia crew reported no signs of tremors or aftershocks. No earthquakes were recorded near Portugal or the Azores at that time. The alcohol explosion theory. Of all the theories, a possible alcohol vapor explosion forcing the crew to abandon ship seems the most credible, though it too has flaws. This theory was proposed by James Winchester, the Mary Celeste's owner. Key points. The 9 empty barrels were made of red oak, unlike the intact white oak casks. Red oak is more porous, possibly allowing alcohol to slowly leak and evaporate, filling the hold with flammable fumes. The steel band securing the barrels could have rubbed together, creating a spark, igniting the vapors. Captain Briggs, seeing smoke and flames, might have panicked and ordered an immediate evacuation. In their haste, the crew failed to properly secure the lifeboat and it drifted away, leaving them to drown, starve, or succumb to the elements. Counter-arguments. When the Mary Celeste was recovered, no one smelled alcohol outside the hold. There were no burn marks or signs of an explosion on the ship's wood. Could the 9 barrels have been empty when loaded in New York? Later theories. Over the years, many wild explanations emerged. Waterspouts, sea tornadoes forced the crew to abandon ship. Enemy submarines, though submarines were not yet operational in 1872. The ship ran aground on a floating sandbar, and the crew, thinking they were stranded, took the lifeboat, only for the sandbar to shift, freeing the ship. One man even claimed to be the sole survivor, spinning a tale about Briggs and the first mate racing around the ship only to be eaten by a shark. A rogue wave then swept the horrified crew overboard, leaving only him alive. The ship, unharmed, sailed on without them. None of these stories were ever verified. Larry Cush's take. In his famous 1975 book, The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved, Larry Kusha, an American researcher and pilot, wrote, None of the explanations hold up under scrutiny, and to this day, the fate of the Mary Celeste's crew remains as much a mystery as it was the day the ship was found abandoned at sea. He also dismissed any Bermuda Triangle connection, pointing out that the Mary Celeste was found near Portugal, thousands of miles from the triangle. Any link was likely just sensationalism. Final thoughts. Despite numerous theories, the Mary Celeste remains one of history's greatest maritime mysteries. Was it human error, natural forces, or something else entirely? Unless new evidence emerges, we may never know for sure.